Hello everyone! Welcome to another episode of Let's Have Renaissance with the Datekeepers. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you are enjoying your day wherever you are. I am Ito Otini.
And I'm Makaya Otini, and today we're joined by Luis Quijano. Luis is a pioneering designer-scientist whose work lies at the cutting edge of fashion biotechnology, material science, and sustainability. His academic journey has taken him across the globe, from Puerto Rico to Australia to China to Thailand, giving him a truly international perspective on the future of design and sustainability and instilling in him a commitment to interdisciplinary and cross-cultural collaboration. We're delighted to speak with him today. Luis, your work is really fascinating because you are working in the sciences and in the arts, and you're trying to get those two fields to talk to one another in ways that they normally don't. So why don't you start by letting our audience know what your work entails and why you're doing it?
Sure. So I like to say that I'm currently finishing up my PhD in fashion biotechnology at Queensland University of Technology in Australia. But for now, I also live in the US. And part of that work, the research involves developing biomaterials as a sustainable textile alternative because the fashion industry is very pollutive in every step of the process. And so when you look at these emerging materials made from bacteria or organisms, or they use technology to create sustainable dyes and coloration, other parts of the fashion process, while it's for art and design and business purpose, there's a lot of science that is intertwined there. So my goal has been to combine that fashion background with this new area of science and try to develop research and technology that can be more sustainable with that combination. In particular, I've been focusing my time on bacterial cellulose, also known as kombucha, which is called like an alternative leather material.
And the drink is delicious, by the way. I can't drink it anymore. I found out it has caffeine in it, but and I'm hypersensitive to caffeine. But I used to love kombucha. So, but you're not. You're. Is it the SCOBY that you're using when you're
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, when you have green tea and then you add a SCOBY, there is bacteria and yeast that will take the green tea, sugar, and other nutrients, and it will cause a fermentation to then transform to kombucha, which has like a bitter taste, or depending, it may be flavored in the store. And so, in particular, I'm more interested in the SCOBY, the material development, but there's a lot of researchers that are improving the material by editing the bacteria, we can say. So there's a lot of different approaches you can take in creating sustainable materials from that SCOBY.
And for our listeners who don't know what SCOBY is, that's an acronym, I think. What does it stand for again?
Right. Symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. It looks like a big blob jelly-like thing. That's like a skin, like a tan color.
It looks good. It doesn't look appetizing, but it's actually it's a good thing. Right. Yeah.
And can you take us back to your journey? Like, when did you decide that this is what you want to do?
So I guess I can share. I first saw a TED Talk by Suzanne Lee, How to Grow Your Own Clothes, when I was an undergrad student at Liberty University, and during that time, I ended up having to do some projects for the honors program, and I knew this interesting topic. I was like, let me try to grow these materials and textiles too. And then one thing after another, I landed myself into a PhD a few more years later, I'm almost finishing. But I guess one pivotal moment I can share was like in my undergrad when I was trying to I learned the basic information, but when I was trying to dive in deeper, I actually used to not like science. But then when I had to start learning more, I had to change that mindset. And I realized, like, if I don't enjoy it, if I don't learn how to learn this completely different area, I can't really do the work that I want to do, which is create these materials. If that makes sense, even though it's design purpose, there's so much science involved in really developing that field that I made the choice to then struggle and keep learning in that direction. But now, a few years later, I feel so much better with that decision.
The field that you're in, did it exist, or are you inventing it?
I think we can say there's like pioneers in the field. Maybe the first few were like in the like Suzanne Lee, the TED Talk, Sasha Loren. There was a few articles around, and then some books made about this fashion biotechnology. But I think what we're seeing, there's things that have existed, but they've always been in separate disciplines. But now we're really seeing things slowly combine, emerge. Like science is increasingly adopting more design approaches. What I mean by that is that they're designing microbes and organisms and modifying them and editing materials in a way that's looks more design oriented, and design is starting to incorporate more scientific processes, laboratory practice, for instance. And so this is quite unique, I think.
You said that the people working in these disciplines historically have been in different silos. How do you get people in different fields to talk to each other? Because you're basically trying to get people who speak different languages to talk to one another. Different disciplines have different lexes, and there's not always overlap, and sometimes one word means something entirely different in different fields. So how do you bridge those gaps?
You're definitely right. There's a lot of, I realized that, oftentimes there can be similar words but different meanings, and I think you also have to, sometimes when you talk to people, some people may have an open mind, whereas others may not be so interested. They may be really just interested in their discipline. So it's a combination of finding the right energy of people willing to collaborate in these interdisciplinary challenges, which, there is difference in terminology, difference in practice, difference in goals. Designers think differently than scientists and want different things, but working with the same materials. So you kind of have to do some negotiating and finding the right people and institutions. It's not always the easiest, unfortunately.
What advice would you share for someone who either wants to engage in an interdisciplinary project like what you do, or who wants to switch from, because Ito knows a lot about switching from one discipline to another.
And it's a lot of fun. I love it.
But it's also a lot of work, right?
It's a lot of work, but if you have just one thing that you know how to do for the rest of your life, I think that's boring. But I respect people who like those things, but I am not. That's why I am a writer, because I don't tell one story all my life. Sometimes good characters, sometimes bad ones, sometimes messed ups, and different. It's like flavors. Life is like food,
like different flavors of kombucha, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go.
But because you've been in so many different fields, you can draw on all of that, and that enriches our writing. And I'm sure that something similar is going on whenever you're putting two fields together. And that's one of the things that we love to do at the Datekeepers, is encourage people to cross over disciplinary lines and work with people in other disciplines. So what advice do you have for someone, again, who wants to engage in an interdisciplinary project, or who is in one discipline but wants to switch to another field and is daunted by that prospect?
I recently wrote a paper about this. Part of my thesis involves interviews with scientists and designers. Scientists didn't struggle much with the science parts, obviously, but designers, every single one of them did with the science. And some things I noticed were, one thing that's important is to find a mentor, whether that's a teacher, or for someone, they had a relative that was really knowledgeable in science, that they're able to ask questions to and feel in a safe space. It can be a tutor or someone that has that knowledge of the other discipline that you can learn from, or at least can guide you as a mentor. So if it's a student in this case, maybe there's a faculty member that they can ask. And I had a faculty member in my undergrad that I was able to ask similar questions to. And I think besides that knowledge source, personally, you have to learn how to be comfortable with not knowing. And that can be hard. Like, how to say, as I'm a perfectionist, if something doesn't go my way in the past, I really struggled to like keep pushing. But in this area, you're not going to know so much, and it's going to be stressful because there's so many new things, and designers don't typically practice in a laboratory, right? Within that, there's so many different contexts and protocols and systems, and biology is different than chemistry and so on. But like, once you get through the hard part of learning, it enriches your experience and future direction. So being okay with the unknown and making mistakes, finding a knowledge source, and finally, I would say finding a space. Because if you want to apply your knowledge, and you find someone that can guide you, whether it's in an official laboratory or just DIY artisanal grow your own kombucha, style projects, you're going to need a dedicated space or a shared space that you can work in to do those projects. So those would be the three things
I
would say.
I love that, because we at the Gatekeepers always emphasize on the power of collaboration, whether through a mentor or, collaborative. But it's always good to have that partnership. I agree.
And there's no one person who knows everything, even in one discipline. And
yeah,
anytime you're doing cross-disciplinary work is just a reminder of that. And I imagine you also have to figure out how to build on what you know to get to what you don't know, and how to use the tools that are already in your tool set to do what other tools are maybe better designed to do. But sometimes you don't have the tool you need, and you have to make something work. I'm thinking of cooking because I love to cook, and sometimes you don't have. I'm not going to think of a good example, but sometimes you don't have a strainer, and you have to figure out how to make a strainer with whatever you have. Like, maybe you're lucky and you have cheesecloth. I guess probably you're more likely to have a strainer than cheesecloth, but that's just me. Anyway,
what challenges do you face doing this type of work, and how do you overcome them?
So I think similar to what I recommended, a first challenge was finding the right people, having the open-mindedness, and also I think reflecting on my personal journey. It was hard to get started, at least for my PhD. Like, I had some basic practice in my undergrad in biology, but I to get into the lab at my university was very challenging. And I think it's because I didn't really refine the purpose of what exactly I wanted to look at. The group I was with is more biology focused on the microbes and editing organisms. But in reality, I realized in the end of my PhD, I'm more interested in the material itself. So I should be focusing on chemistry and material science. With that in mind, I pivoted towards a chemistry lab, and I started learning more practices, which was a challenge, but I was so happy I realized that pivot. I took action and I learned towards that. And maybe one day I can come back to the biology part, but okay, back to summarize. Really understanding what you want to do in that practice, because for design there's all these possibilities, right? And designers are creative, they like to combine things, but in the science field you're really looking at variables, at things at a time, right? And see how those subtle differences can change the material structure or performance or coloration. So you really need to define that project quite a bit before you enter that space, especially that we have a different background, if that makes sense, if you're a non-scientist.
Mm-hmm. And what are your plans for after you finish, you finalize your PhD? What are you planning to? Mm-hmm.
So I should be submitting my thesis early June, and then I wait a few months. I'll get my diploma a little bit later this year, and I'm starting to just keep learning more, but also postdoctoral applications. I know some fields that's not common, but because I want to use multiple disciplines together, I'm looking for laboratories that I can collaborate with and keep on learning and using my skills and passion. And so I've been working on those applications, and hopefully next year I'll be starting that type of position. And I think ultimately I would like to stay in academia, even though it can be a bit tiring and stressful. But I think I enjoy more the academic side of exploration, but with the collaborating with industry very closely. And I can work on applications together with startups and businesses and look at real sustainable products and technologies that can change industry. That would be my goal.
You said you were making the kombucha leather. Can you tell us a little more about what that is and what you use it for?
Right.
Why do you need kombucha leather?
So it's kombucha leather when it's wet is very thick and heavy. There's a lot of water weight, but when you dry it out, it becomes like a paper leather like material, and people are always fascinated with it and smell it, and the colors it's very easy to color with different dyes. And so not only actually right now that type of material in the lab is grown and mainly for biomedical pharmacy application, but then in the last decade that's been explored for fashion. And right now it's not currently the perfect material. Some people are using it for a composite. They may put like a small percentage of it with cotton or something else to make it stronger, but as a material with no modifications, it can be a bit brittle or like has issues with waterproofing. So if it's raining or you're sweating a lot, moisture, those are things that need to improve. In my case,
it's not an optimal swimsuit.
Right, okay. Right. So I was, for my thesis, I was just really curious on the coloration, and I was combining like textile dyes and mordants, which are common in the fashion field, but they haven't really been tested in the biological space with this material. And what I found was like mordants did help this cellulose fibers, just like regular textiles. But I need to write that paper. But and so I guess I want to do more textile property like research, but also I want to collaborate with other fields as well, because as we're all learning with this material, there's things that I can learn from others that I never realized. So for instance, earlier this year I was in Germany and I visited a pharmacy group. They're making the drug delivery using the same material, but the bacterial cellulose laboratory grown form. And I realized that they actually, some of their drugs have color, and the way they deliver, maybe that could be inspiration for how I do my next textile dyeing technique or something. And they also use different words, I forget what it was, burst loading or something like that, instead of like color fastness or so it was very interesting that with fields that you would never guess could be in common, we found overlap working with the same.
So what is the biomedical application? What is it used for in medicine?
Right. So I guess I can say first that this material is biocompatible. You can eat it. It's safe to eat. And in Asia, it's a big industry artisanally called nata de coco, which is like these coconut jellies. And back to pharmacy, because it is biocompatible, they can use it in different shapes and material forms, some dried, some wet, some freeze-dried, and then they can actually add medicine and then use it like for wound healing or to get inside your body to certain body parts and drug release over time. You know, some capsules, they don't just release all the medicine right away, but you may need to have a slow release, and they can do things like that with the bacterial cellulose as well.
Wow.
AKA
so right. it's functioning as the capsule?
Yeah, that's good, I think.
Right?
Yeah, it's the delivery system. Think of it as like the envelope for the that's inside. Okay. But it's hard to get it to the certain houses that you need, right? AKA body parts. So some of it is outside, like skin or fungal infection in your fingernail. You can put some bacterial cellulose, and it has been treated with something inside that can help it be effective.
Interesting.
So,
Wow, that's fascinating. How do you communicate this with your family, especially those who are not in art or science? I mean, even those who are not combining the two. Like, do you talk about your work with your family? And if yes, how do you explain to them what you do?
they know the material and they've seen some things online. I don't know. My dad used to be an accountant and a professor back in the day, so I think for me, it's easy to talk to him about some academic thing. If he doesn't understand, he does mention something, and then I can try to explain. But they know at least that I'm trying to be more sustainable materials and combine disciplines. So the core thing that I try, they get it. Mm-hmm. And my mom used to be a nurse. So she always liked more science things, and I think she can understand a little bit there.
It sounds like she would have some insight into the medical applications too.
Maybe after this call, after this interview, I may ask her about that as well.
It seems interesting to me because you're using the organic material to make clothing, and in a way that's just bringing things full circle, because clothing was originally all made out of organic material, whether cotton or animal skins.
Fiber and pollution in this way. Clothing was very rare or not so industrialized, mass produced. If it was broken, you would just stitch and fix it yourself or go to someone, right? And so it's kind of bringing things there. But what gets me interested is that now this material comes out that it can be clothing and in a different way. It could be medicine, and it's used in brands of Sony headphone, like electronics.
Oh, no way.
And it can be paper, food, in desserts. It was flown to outer space, and it's just a very versatile material depending on how you process it, and it doesn't need that much effort to process.
So, how about to grow it in the first place? Is it substantially less energy intensive to produce than things like cotton, for example?
That's a good question that I'm not too familiar with yet. In the reason that there have been, I think just now are starting the life cycle analyses. People say that this is sustainable, but is it really sustainable quantitatively, industrially? It really depends on what people do and the company. So for instance, in fashion, there can be a lot of greenwashing. And so if you're getting the raw ingredients from halfway around the world, that could possibly make this more unsustainable, even though it's grown sustainably, because you're not using local regional resources. Or if at the end of the material I add some finishes that make it longer lasting, but then it has a lot of chemical process, there could be a bit more not environmentally friendly processes. It really depends on what's your end product goal and what are you trying to get out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you would like to share with our audience?
I guess I can just reiterate, if you're interested in projects that combine disciplines together, don't hesitate to reach out to people. And you may not get a good, a response right away, but just keep reaching out until you do get a response and you do find someone that you do feel that you can learn from, because it can take a while. Although the world is more opening up now, it's a really hard process, especially with materials, to get in these spaces. But if you are, willing to go through that, at the end of it, it does become very rewarding, being able to learn and use from different skill sets.
And where can people go to learn more about your work?
I do have a LinkedIn profile. That's probably easier at Luis Quijano, LuisQuijano. And I will message back if you need some advice on these type of projects.
Luis, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've had a great time. I'm sure our audience is going to enjoy this too. We've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we hope you are enjoying your day wherever you are in the world. I am Ito Utini.
And I'm Makaya Utini, and this is Let's Have a Renaissance, the Date Keepers podcast.
Before we sign off, We would very much appreciate if you could do us a favor. Please subscribe, share, and like.
The more you do for us, the more we can do for you. Help us connect and support our creative community by sharing this episode with your friends, families, connections on social media, and any other channels that you like to use.
Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.